Thomas, I told you recently about this alleged Project Thor, right? And this is the big thing that the mainstream media are trying to spin around. And it's all about Theo Rycroft, of course, an assistant to His Majesty the King.
There is a cottage industry in royal media right now built entirely on one idea: that reconciliation is coming, that behind the scenes, careful people are doing careful work, that the rift between Harry and his family is being quietly, professionally managed toward a resolution. The names even come with branding now: Project Thor, a senior aide supposedly making it his life's work to repair the damage between William and Harry. Bulletproof Sunshine, the communications specialist brought in to manage the Prince of Wales's image. Headlines that arrive fully formed, with narrative and momentum and the implicit promise that movement is happening. Here is what I want to ask, clearly and directly. If all of this machinery is genuinely in motion, if the reconciliation project is real and progressing, why is the person at the center of the problem still the problem? Because I can tell you from a source who is genuinely close to the king that the picture behind the headlines is considerably more complicated than the headlines suggest, and it starts and ends with one person: the spin machine, what these stories actually are. Let's talk about how these stories get made, because understanding the process helps you read the product. A senior aide, an important role, a mandate, real or implied, to work on something significant. Someone writes it up, the headline lands, and instantly that person is carrying the weight of a narrative that may bear very little relationship to what they are actually doing day to day. This is not unique to royal reporting. It happens in politics, in business, in entertainment. The gap between what a headline implies and what is actually happening can be enormous. And the person named in the story now has to either confirm it, deny it, or, most likely, they say nothing while the narrative runs. The reconciliation stories serve a specific purpose. They keep hope alive. They give readers something to follow. They suggest forward motion in a story that has, in truth, been largely static for years. But forward motion in a story about reconciliation requires one thing above everything else. Both sides have to want it, what the king actually wants. Here is the honest picture as I understand it from people who are genuinely close to the king. His Majesty would like some form of relationship with his youngest son. This is a father. He is baffled, genuinely, deeply baffled, by the turn that Harry took, by the speed of it, by the completeness of it, by the fact that the person he believed he knew was capable of the things that followed. He misses his son. That is real. It is not a headline. It is the private reality of a man in his later years who has watched something break and cannot fully understand why it broke the way it did. That much is true. But here is where the reconciliation story falls apart, because the king's feelings about Harry are not the same as his feelings about the situation surrounding Harry. And the situation surrounding Harry has, at its center, a person toward whom the king's feelings are, to use the most diplomatic language available, extremely cold. The word used by someone familiar with the king's private position is stark. He has, at this point, essentially no desire to rebuild any relationship with Meghan Markle. Not because of a single incident, not because of one interview or one chapter of one book. Because of the accumulation, the treatment of people who were genuinely kind, the handling of the father she left outside the wedding, the sustained public relentless campaign against an institution and a family that, whatever its imperfections, tried to accommodate her, and perhaps above all, what was done and said about Camilla, the queen consort, his wife, a woman who tried, by multiple accounts, to build a relationship with Meghan and was given nothing in return.
That is, of course, the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry. And the big story is, of course, he can do wonders, all of that sort of stuff. It's a little bit like the same spinny headline that they came up with for the Prince of Wales's latest communications assistant, Bulletproof Sunshine. Who's writing these stories.
The Camilla dimension. This element of the story receives less attention than it deserves. Camilla is not a woman who was hostile to Meghan from the beginning. She is, by the accounts of those who know her, someone who understood that families are complicated and who made genuine attempts to smooth the waters in the early days. Angela Kelly, devoted to the late queen, deeply protective of the people she served, worked quietly behind the scenes to help manage some of the friction that was already becoming visible. Even she found it difficult. Camilla tried. By what I understand, she genuinely tried. And Harry, in his memoir and in various interviews, said what he said about her. The king heard it, he absorbed it, and whatever warmth existed before those words were spoken has not returned. This is the reality that sits underneath every reconciliation headline. The king would like his son back. He would accept his son without preconditions, quietly, informally, in private. But his son comes as a package, and the other half of that package is someone toward whom the king has nothing left to offer. The demand that reveals everything. Here is a detail that tells you more about the current dynamic than almost anything else. At one point, when the Netflix deals were running and the public profile was at its peak, The position was clear. No return to British soil without a public apology. Not a private acknowledgement, not a quiet gesture, a public address. A formal, visible admission that things had been done wrong and that wrongs needed to be righted. The audacity of that demand, viewed from inside the palace, was remarkable. To be told by someone who had left, who had taken what they took and said what they said, that their return was conditional upon the institution bending first, it was not received quietly. But here is what has changed since then. The deals are not what they were. The public profile has declined. The leverage that existed when Netflix paying and the world was watching has eroded. And quietly, behind the careful management and the lifestyle posts and the charitable appearances, something else has become visible. Meghan would, by all accounts, like a way back in. Not the same door, not the same terms, but a foothold, a presence, a restoration of something that was given up and is now, in its absence, understood to have been more valuable than it appeared. The king sees this. He is not naive. He has been watching people navigate self-interest for 7 decades, and his position has not shifted in the direction that would make any of it possible.
You know, you just kind of think, right, okay, you get a massive headline, you get some attention, and also, I would say, from my experience, it puts on a lot of pressure to the person that actually does have to do that job. You know what I mean? It's not that easy. Just because somebody says you're terrific, you can do it, right?
Project Thor and why it won't work. Back to the beginning, back to the aid and the mandate and the headlines about reconciliation machinery. Here is the fundamental problem with Project Thor, or any version of it. Reconciliation between Harry and William is not a communications problem. It cannot be managed from a briefing document or resolved through a series of carefully handled meetings. It is a trust problem, and trust between two brothers who have said what they have said to each other and about each other through books and interviews and legal proceedings does not respond to professional mediation. William's position has been described to me as firm. Not angry, not vindictive, simply firm. A man who has processed what happened, who has understood what it cost him and his family, and who has arrived at a place of clarity about what he is and is not prepared to do. He would not close the door permanently. In a genuine crisis, he would be there, because that is who William is. But the day-to-day relationship, the closeness, the trust, that would require something that has not happened. Something more than a speech at the Invictus Games or a letter to a government minister or a well-timed appearance at a charity event. It would require a reckoning with what was done. Not for the cameras, not as a press release, a real one. And that reckoning right now is nowhere in sight. Headlines about reconciliation projects and communication specialists and carefully named operations will keep coming. They are not nothing. There are real people doing real work inside the palace, trying to manage an enormously complicated situation with care and professionalism. But the core of the problem is not a communications failure. It is not a scheduling conflict or a mismanaged briefing. It is a relationship between a king and a daughter-in-law where the goodwill has been spent, where the patience has run out, where the question of what would need to change for things to be different is one that nobody in Montecito appears to be genuinely asking. Until that question gets asked honestly, the headlines about progress will remain exactly what they are. Something to read, nothing to believe. Drop your thoughts below. I always want to know whether you see a path through this that I am missing. Like this video if it gave you the clearer picture. Subscribe to stay with the story as it continues to develop. Take care. See you very soon.